Welcome to Authenticity Unleashed. I'm your host, Pam Rader, and I have Charles Canaan here with me today, who is the founder and creative director of Simply Gold Productions. It's a video production company that is now based in West Kelowna, BC. And Charles's background is in documentary. And he's built a career as a visual storyteller, specializing in creating high quality cinematic videos that help businesses connect with their audience. So Charles has held a lot of roles in the film and sports industries, including positions as a content producer for the Vancouver Canucks, Woo Woo, editor at True Calling, and creative director and co-founder of Mount Pleasant Films. His experience spans from camera operation to content management, reflecting his comprehensive understanding of visual media. That sounds pretty impressive, Charles. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for that intro. I really appreciate it, Pam. And I really appreciate you having me on here today.
I'm so excited because we share a passion, and that is to shine a light on the harm that's being done to our society and really beautiful human beings by the opioid crisis. And we both know people who have been affected by it. And we are both on a mission to help in any way we can. And you've done something extraordinary. So listen up, folks. Charles, along with his partners, Rob and Kevin, created a documentary called Toxic. Tell us what this documentary is about, what it's meant to do, and what your hopes are for it.
Yeah, so the documentary is about the opioid crisis that has been occurring in British Columbia over the last, I would say now it's been almost 10 years now, and it's a really hard-hitting, unflinching look at the decades of failed drug policy and also lack of mental health services as well too that all contribute to this crisis that we're dealing with. And it's been a long road making this film, and a few years ago, after the COVID pandemic happened, we got together and finally wrapped up the film, and now we're in the process of taking it to different theaters across the province. And so far it's been a huge eye-opening success. Every screening that we've had around the province has sold out, so the response has been huge, very overwhelming. And I just recently moved to Kelowna in July. I live in West Kelowna now, and I've always had a dream to have this film screened in the Okanagan, specifically Kelowna, because this issue that is happening isn't just a Vancouver problem. It is a global problem, but speaking locally here too, it's happening everywhere in British Columbia, and it's definitely happening in the Okanagan and in Kelowna.
So you built your career as a visual storyteller working with brands and organizations. What made you want to shift your focus to making a documentary like this? Was there a personal connection to this issue for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So growing up, I went to Catholic all boys school, and when you think of places like that, you don't really think that issues with drugs and overdose can be an issue, but it was. I knew a lot of people that struggled with addiction in my school, and as we got older, the problems seemed to get worse and worse and worse, and then fentanyl kind of came into the picture. And yeah, just over the last, I would say 10 years, like myself, Kevin, and even, Rob as well too, we've all experienced great loss. And I think everyone knows somebody that has either overdosed, passed away from this crisis. The problem, this issue is really starting to hit us home, and I've lost some friends to it, like I just said. And, we really wanted to bring this issue to light and to destigmatize it, because not that long ago this wasn't something that people wanted to talk about, but I think definitely now it definitely is. So
I love that we're trying to destigmatize it, because I know the subject of a big part of the subject of the film is based on Guy Felicella, friend of yours, and a big advocate for the same passion, trying to get education out there in the world, if you will. And I look at my son who is in recovery, and when they were at their worst, people that we love and know, they're still somebody's son, they're somebody's friend, they're somebody's brother, they're somebody, and they're human beings. And as a society, we tend to forget about them, put them on the fringe, pile them in a lot of, like let's completely discard them because it's too ugly to look at. But I can say from my own experience, Guy wrote the foreword for a recent book that I was a part of. I was a co-author, and he spoke at the book launch. So I got to hear his story. And then knowing my son's story, I think what a miracle that these two brilliant, beautiful human beings are contributing so powerfully to society through their recovery. And we forget that that potential is in every single one of those people that we see struggling on the street. There's contributions to be made. They are loving and they are loved. And if we keep piling them in the garbage pile behind the buildings, they lose their humanity to us. What kind of transformations, personal transformations, did you have in immersing yourself in the work of making this film? Because you must have had so many interactions that even probably were shocking to you.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that, came away from working on this film was just kind of realizing and understanding that everybody has a chance and there is always hope no matter what, no matter how bad the situation looks. For example, Guy's situation, I mean, he was he was on the downtown east side for 20 plus years, and people would look at him and say, well, there's no way that somebody like this could ever get rehabilitated, could ever change, could ever, let alone have a family. And now he's a very well-known speaker. He goes across the world and he does talks, and he's been a great, maker of change in this topic. So I think the biggest thing that I took from this was hope. There is a chance for everybody. They just have to have the resources, and we just have to be able to reach our hands out and lend them a hand when they need help, because you are able to change, and it doesn't matter in what state you're in. Like, you have a chance, there is a chance. So I think that's the biggest thing that we're trying to do with this film, is really change people's minds that still may have that mentality of, oh yeah, that there's no way that person's ever going to change. I mean, look at them, they're sleeping behind a dumpster, like you said, discard them. I think what this film, what we're really trying to do with it, is just really change people's mindsets and help them understand that anything is possible, and somebody can go from being in the worst place in their life to being a member of society again, have a family, and also be able to also give back and help change what we're trying to do here, just like Guy is doing as well.
And I don't know about you, but as I get more and more into this work and more conversations like this one, what I notice is that I'm uncovering my own unconscious stigmas and biases. I see my own prejudice of, and walk by people and turn away because it's hard to look at. And I'm having to confront those things within myself. And I think it's every individual's responsibility to realize we don't really ever arrive at a place of, oh, I'm fully open and enlightened, but to continue to look for the places within ourselves that keep us separate. Did you have any experiences like that while you were making the film, of like confronting your own internal biases? No.
Yeah, internal.
That's
So
okay.
yeah, you're talking about internal biases.
Yeah, I had an experience of I spoke at an event called a conversation that matters: the faces of addiction, speaking from the perspective of a mother of someone who is in addiction and someone who had been married to someone who was an addict who died of addiction. And when I left that event, I was speaking about having compassion and understanding that addiction is the result of trauma and, environment and all of that. And that our judgment isn't going to help anyone with addiction. What's needed is connection and compassion. And then I found myself walking into the superstore, and there's a gentleman outside there sitting with a cardboard sign. And I caught myself turn away. And I just like caught it. And I was like, how many times have I done that? The least I could do is look this human being in the eye. And it was hard for me a little bit, and in that moment, I was like, ooh, I still have some work to do. If I'm being honest with myself, I think we don't like to look at things that are hard and things that are challenging. Did you come across any moments like that as you were making the film?
Yeah, I think what you just mentioned there, I think that's a really great point, is a lot of people that may be in this situation, all they really need is just that one moment of compassion. And I think leading with compassion is such an important piece to this. For example, I think meeting Guy was amazing for me. I mean, him and I are really good friends now. And I love hearing his stories. He said kind of the moment that really helped him kind of begin that change was, somebody buying him a cup of coffee and just talking to him and listening to him. And he mentions that story quite often.
He shared that story, and it really touched me that it was Christmas Day,
Yeah,
and a woman bought him a coffee, gave him $50, but she offered to give him a hug.
yeah,
And he didn't care about the $50 or the coffee so much. He just couldn't believe that someone would take a moment to hug somebody like him.
yeah.
And he never forgot that. And my son has a similar story, of
Hmm.
it was just really one person who would, when everyone said that he was a lost cause, and it was one person who said, you know what, I'm just going to love him. I'm just going to
Yeah.
love this kid. And there was a turning point there, and we never know when that's going to be.
Hmm.
And I know for myself, I would sure hope that I would be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. I might never know that that moment of compassion that I gave was a catalyst for healing, but I'd like to be aware enough to try to be that person for someone.
Hmm.
Is that kind of the hope of this film? Is it that it would lead people to more compassion?
Definitely. And, every time we screen this film, we always do a talk after. And I think the biggest topic is always after, leading with compassion and love,
Mhm.
because a lot of people that may be feeling alone or in this situation, they might not feel that love at all.
Right.
So I think just being able to, you know, keep an open mind and just kind of remember that at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We might be in different stages of our life and we might be struggling with certain things, but at the end of the day, we're all human beings and we just need a little bit of love.
I have a spiritual teacher. I don't know if you're a spiritual guy or not, but I got this spiritual teacher that says to me that we all choose our lives, and that a lot of people that are in addiction and struggling, they're actually very high spiritual beings who choose a very difficult life to learn some lessons, which makes me think that we could learn something from them.
Yeah.
We seek so much comfort and trying to make life easy and make it nice, but if we look at it in terms of spiritual growth, perhaps there's something for us. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, growth isn't always linear, right? And you can grow in very interesting ways. And I totally agree with that. I think, certain people take different paths and then their lives change based on the experiences that they have, whether it's good or bad at the time. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Now you are working on getting this film into the schools in British Columbia, which I think is brilliant and amazing, and we really need to have that happen. What would the hope be, in terms of outcome to getting that film into the schools in BC?
Yeah, I think it's a really important topic. This issue in general, there's not a single thing that can fix it overnight. And I think
Mhm.
some people that are a little bit more closed minded think of it that way. Like, what do we do to fix this? It's just one singular thing, just throw people in jail type thing, right? I
Mhm.
think it's a multi kind of pronged issue. And one of the things I feel that we can really help with it is to educate young people in school, people that might be in a position where they're being influenced at school and, they're getting a lot of voice and chatter on experimenting with drugs. So we think that it'd be really important for us to try and get this into the school system. And it's something that we are working on. I think this film is, although it's pretty intense, it is definitely very very eye opening. And I feel like if we can get it to people, young people at a younger age, it'll be very impactful too.
I love it. It reminds me, like, I grew up in I'm older than you. I grew up in the era of scared straight. And honestly, that worked. I was terrified of drugs. I was
Yeah,
like, it worked.
yeah.
I was scared of my dad. If I ever did drug, I was scared. Like, I was scared to do them because of the consequences. And I think that drug culture has been so normalized, maybe a lot in part to, shifts in the in culture, I guess, but even in the music culture and all of that, it's very normalized. And the thing about it that I see is that kids don't get an opportunity. Like, experimentation is Russian roulette now. It's
Mhm.
not like when I was in the 80s, you could experiment with drugs. And, if you didn't get hooked, you're going to be fine. It's like you could try it once and die because of the toxicity of the drug supply. So we're
Mhm.
playing a different game now. And
Mhm.
I think it's our responsibility to get that information into the hands of kids so that they can make decisions that are more informed instead of sort of caving to peer pressure or making uninformed decisions based on the information of other 17-year-olds,
Mhm. Yeah. No, I think something to add to that as well too is fentanyl, addiction, overdose, it doesn't care who you are. And I feel
Mhm.
like a lot of people may think, oh, it targets a certain kind of person or a certain type of class, or that's not me, or that'll never happen to me. And what we're trying to push with this film is that it doesn't care who you are. It doesn't matter what class you're in. It doesn't care if you're a lawyer or a doctor, or it doesn't care if you're a teenager. Um, like you said, it's all it takes is one time, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important too with this film is what we're trying to shed light on.
Well, I think that addiction itself, I mean, it's an escalating disease. And so, if booze is your drug of choice, then, you'll escalate into alcoholism. But when we're talking about sort of street drugs, the escalation, the final escalation is fentanyl. It's the last and most potent painkiller when everything else stops working. And I think that we have to remember that it is just an attempt to kill pain. And fentanyl does its job. It does its job. It kills pain for people. But when we look at it in terms of that there's something wrong with the person, that they're an addict and they're causing all these problems for society and they have some will in it and all of that, we're missing, again, the humanity and treating the root cause, which is how do we help them deal with the pain that they're trying to avoid? I love that you just said it doesn't care who you are, because neither does pain. And we all, as human beings, will experience devastating pain at some point in our lives. A loss of a friend or a family member, all kinds of things happen in this human life, and none of us are immune from pain. And if we can't find that commonality, we're never going to be able to find the compassion. I had a friend of mine who's an RCMP officer, and he said to me, Pam, there by the grace of God go all of us. We are all just one bad decision away from being one of the people that we call those people. He talks about how he's arrested former politicians for stealing a roast beef out of the superstore, and because they got a drug addiction and everything fell apart. None of us are immune. So education is the first step, as you said, and I love that you're involved in that. I believe in supporting the families. I'm also on a mission to educate the people who love people in addiction, to help them find the strategies and tools that they need. And I think if you love someone who struggles, you need recovery too. What else do you think can be done? What are we not doing? I mean, you were in the trenches with this, making this documentary, and you probably saw a lot more than I've seen. What are we not doing?
That's a really good question. I think there's a lot of different things that we're not doing. I think unfortunately we're not attacking this as a whole, as a group. There's a lot of different people that have a lot of different opinions and a lot of different things. And I also think there is a lack of funding. Our first responders are incredibly exhausted and beat down. The gentleman that was in our film was a former first responder, and he created Street Saviors. He passed away from an overdose not that long ago.
Oh,
And yeah, he mentioned to us, he talked to us when he was a paramedic, when he was on the street working with Street Saviors, that there's just such a lack of not only funding, but there's just resources, right? So people that are on the front lines trying to help, they're also struggling too. I don't think people even think about that. But the people that are helping
no.
are also the ones that are struggling too. Right?
I have a young fellow that works for me at my yoga studio, and he works for the shelters downtown Kelowna, and he talks about how many times a day people overdose, and the ambulances have to go down, and how exhausted the paramedics are, and then they get compassion fatigue too, and you can't blame them; they're human beings as well. Because they're getting yelled at because someone who fell and broke their hip is now waiting 2 hours for the ambulance, which actually happened. We had somebody fall and break their hip in near our studio, and it took that long for the ambulance to come because they were so overwhelmed with all of the overdose problems that were happening. And so I can see how people get incited and get mad and then blame the addict and blame the system and all of that. But it's such a complex issue. We need more first responders, more resources for the people who are living in addiction. What else do you think we need to be doing that we're not?
I think this is something that's definitely gotten better over the years, but like we just talked about, I think the root of all of this is pain and trauma.
Mhm.
And then people using to run away from that pain and trauma. So I think, if we can implement even more mental health services, I think mental health is such an important topic nowadays, and I think it's really been discussed, and companies are really understanding it as well too, and providing resources. But I just think doubling down on that even more, so that people don't get to that point of having to use and then overdose, right? So I think, yeah, doubling down, tripling down on that even, right? I think that'd be a big one.
The big thing that I notice amongst people that I have loved that have struggled with addiction or currently struggle with addiction is that they're covering up a deep level of shame. There's the feeling of inadequacy, which I think is also common to all human beings on some level. We all have experienced shame. We've all experienced feeling inadequate or not enough or different or separate in some way. And what I know is that shame and blame does not cure shame. If we could shame and blame our way out of disease, we would all be well because we're really good at shame and blame. But shining a light on things without judgment, without flinching, is a pathway for people to heal. So, as we're talking about what we're not doing, one of the things that I see is people are not taught how to hold space for someone. When we're talking about mental health, we're not taught how to just sit and hear someone's pain or hear someone's story without going, you know what you should do? Have you tried rehab? Have you read this? Like, shut up. Just hold space for people. Let them be human, be in the space with them. And I think that we need more resources to teach people how to sit with people, which is a really, tribal practice, ancient practice. We used to know how to sit with people that were suffering. And I think as a society, we've really lost that ability.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that.
Yeah. So when you're making the film, were you challenged with your ability to sit with people in their pain? Like it's hard not to flinch.
Yeah, I think the challenging part for our team, because we got full access, we had ride-alongs with Fire Hall 2 on the downtown east side, and I think the tough part is just seeing kind of the state of where we're at, and kind of just the pain and suffering when you're out there, and seeing people struggling, and being brought back to life, and being mad that they got brought back to life, and just seeing these things is just, I think that was the toughest part, was just seeing the pain and suffering that close. And then on top of that too, like while making the film, like multiple people passing away, whether it was in our circles or people that were in the film, I think that was probably the toughest part. Like knowing that a year ago, 2 years ago, I just sat down with this person and we had an interview with them and they were doing well, and now they're not here anymore. I think that was
Yeah.
probably the toughest part.
Oh, that is, I can't even imagine what that feels like. I know my son was telling me a few months back that in the span of about 2 years, he lost 38 friends. 38 people that he knew died from overdose. No one should know 38 people that die in a normal span of a 30-year-old life, you know?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So let's just switch gears a little bit. I definitely think everyone should see this film. It's going to sell out here in Kelowna. When I looked to buy my tickets, it was already selling very well. And we'll put the link to purchase tickets in the show notes for sure. But I want to just switch gears a little bit here because you're kind of an extraordinary guy. And I know Kevin. I've met Kevin Regney, who is one of the partners on this film. And you guys are really people that care deeply, and not just, you don't just talk about it. You did something. And a lot of people dream of making an impact through their work, but they're kind of held back by fear, or they're like, well, what am I supposed to do? But you guys stepped into the arena and you did something, and you continue to push it forward and try to like create an impact in the world with it. What advice would you give to someone who wants to follow their passion, but they don't know where to start?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think if you do what you love, like I love this saying, if you do what you love, like you feel like you never worked a day in your life. And,
Mm-hmm.
I know Kevin feels that way, and myself and Rob too. Fear can always kind of hinder you and hold you back. But if you can get over that fear, and you find something that you're super interested in doing, if you want to do something for your community or share a story, it was definitely a group effort. It was a team effort. We reached out in our community and we pitched this idea. And it was, it's amazing what you can accomplish if you can just put yourself out there and put your idea out there just to kind of test the waters and feel it out and see where it's going to go. And you'll be surprised at how many people want to jump on and help. And that's exactly what happened with us. Kind of the snowball just got bigger, right? We started with this small idea. We partnered up. We put it on paper. And I think if you're trying to create something big like that, you just need to understand that it's baby steps, and it took us years to finish it, and we just kept going. And no matter what, like COVID hit, we kept going because we knew what an important issue that this was. And we knew the end goal of this is to save lives. And, when we would have it at theaters, people would come up to us and say, like, you've saved my life, you've saved my kid's life. So just knowing that really inspired us and pushed us to go to the finish line and get this film finished. So
I love it. There's so many gems in what you just said there. So I want to pull those apart so that people that are listening can really dial that in. So number one, you just have to start. Just start. If you care about something, like, you have to have, in my view, the attitude of, if not me, then who? Like, if I have this idea, maybe it's my divine responsibility to be the one to bring this forth. And what if I got that inspiration and I just stifled it and no one does this? So I always say, like, if not you, then who? And if not now, then when? Is a really great way to sort of catalyze motion. It makes me feel personally responsible. I know I'm in the midst of some projects right now that I was like, I don't know if this is over my head or out of my league, but I'm like, I feel like if I don't do it, who else is going to do it? So I'm just going to try. The second thing you said in there was about proximity. And now I think that, there are two things that are important in success. You said both, but consistency, like, you kept going no matter what. You didn't let the obstacles stop you. So consistency, yes. But we tend to be more consistent when we are surrounded by other passionate people who are game changers. Getting yourself in proximity to people who are up to bigger things than themselves is, I think, 100% necessary. And so this idea that we have to do anything alone, I think that stops a lot of people from bringing these amazing ideas to life. But when you get around, there's probably times when you were tired, or Kevin was tired, or Rob was, and it was the other ones that kept you going, and you get inspired by each other. So I think proximity is a really important piece as well. Who you surround yourself with matters. If you want to make your mark in the world, surround yourself with other people that are doing it. What are some of the biggest lessons that you learned personally as a result of making this documentary, maybe beyond filmmaking, like leadership or activism or personal growth? What did you learn about yourself?
I think if you're onto something and you got a good idea, you're probably going to get some pushback, because that means that you're onto something. Obviously, this is such a polarizing topic. Like, we got some pushback from people. People had opinions on it. We were trying to source interviews and get people involved, and obviously lots of people were thrilled to be involved, but then also there's some pushback on that, right? And that's kind of when we knew we're like, okay, we're onto something. This is a really important topic. So just something like a lesson learned, like, no matter what obstacles happen in life, like, just keep moving forward and keep pushing. And like you said, surround yourself with a team that's there to prop you up. And I think that was probably the biggest lesson, because we could have easily given up after the first year or two of making this, right? And we didn't. We kept going. So I think that would be the biggest lesson that I've definitely learned working on this.
I love that. Yeah, the obstacles are the way. I always think if you're not pissing someone off, you're not really doing anything.
Yeah, exactly.
So if someone's pissed off about what you have to say, you're probably onto something. Yeah. Take the feedback, discern, but also whoa, okay, then there's a topic that is worth diving into. Now, this leads me to kind of right today, this moment. I've been reading on social media and all over the place about all these tariffs that are coming in from the United States. And it's because Canada never closed their borders for fentanyl, and this, and Mexico with the fentanyl and all of this. And I'm like, I don't think we know enough about any of that to have a specific opinion. I don't know how much of that is a smokescreen for would he have just done that anyway? I am not politically savvy, so I don't know. But I think interesting that fentanyl is kind of front and center as the reason for all of these things happening. Do you think that films like yours could eventually change policy that could actually impact global politics?
Yeah, I mean, I think as the years go on and we continue to start realizing what a kind of an issue this is, I think it just keeps growing and growing. And yeah, it's interesting that it's being brought up again recently in the news, and that it's actually being acknowledged as a large problem now, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that is a huge goal. We have had politicians at our screenings. You know, we've done interviews with politicians, and I think I mentioned this before. I think as a community, we all need to be on the same page, and that includes lawmakers and change makers. So if this film can even change one or two people to make the right decision to change policy, we'll be thrilled, right? So if this can be a
Right.
catalyst for change, this is, that's kind of the goal of this film.
What I recently went to a debate at UBC Okanagan. Well, they put it on in Kelowna, and they had Lisa Laflamme, who was the previous chief coroner in BC. They had a panel of high level people who were offering their ideas about how to solve the opioid crisis. And what I found was interesting was they all agreed that compassion was definitely necessary. But the ideas on policy were so different and so far, and they were kind of arguing with each other. And I looked across the panel and I thought, it's interesting to me that there's all these professors and high level people there, and there was no one who was in addiction. It's kind of like this. We don't ask, what do you need? What would help? And I, for one, think that is a major problem in making policy, is that we don't include the people that it will affect the most.
Totally.
So I hope with your film that we can maybe get some more awareness out there and have some collaboration and contribution from the people that are suffering in the trenches with this, being able to contribute and collaborate and possibly give guidance to our system as to what would be most helpful and when intervention is most helpful, because there really is the statistics on what constitutes recovery are so different, and most of it is for marketing. You know, the rehabilitation centers that are private, if you're clean for 90 days, they consider that a success. They don't care what happens afterwards. So they can say that they have so many success rates and this and that, but it's private and it's different for so we don't even have a measuring stick as to what works. We don't know. So when we don't know what works, I think that the answer is the next question. What kind of questions can we ask that would help lead us all forward as a society? Charles, what do you think we should be asking?
That is a big question. Yeah, that's a good question. I think, like I mentioned earlier before, this is such a multi-pronged issue. And I think the question should be not only what are we doing on the front lines, what are we doing in terms of the drug policies, but what are we doing with, people in school? What are we doing with our children's questions? What are we doing with people that are leaving recovery? What resources do they have now? One of the gentlemen that's in our film who passed away, he talked about his experience of leaving recovery and not knowing what to do. He did not think that he was a functioning member of society. All he knew was how to hustle, and he didn't know how to get a job or write a resume or anything. So I think that's another question too. There's a lot of different questions, and I think that we just need to identify the different stages of this issue and kind of ask the appropriate questions there.
I love that, because that was my experience. My son went to treatment 29 times between recovery houses and everything, 29 times. And it was maximum, maybe, I think the longest he had clean, maybe 6 months, because 3 months in treatment and then you're kind of put out there, maybe even in second stage, but there's no real support. There's no real community or connection. So one of the questions I would want to ask is, how are we treating people? How are we supporting people who are earnestly desiring recovery after treatment? We're just putting Band-Aids on bullet holes, sending people to 30 and 60-day programs. and then putting them back out in the street. But for me, what really comes up is I'm big on sort of looking at where am I part of the problem. And so the questions that come to mind for me as you're just speaking are, where can I do better to serve people that are right in front of me? Instead of looking at it as this great big problem, where do I turn away? Where do I turn a blind eye, and why? What am I so afraid of? Why do I have judgment about this? And if so, why? Where did it come from? What would be available to me if I confronted that judgment? Could I be more compassionate and be part of the solution? So I think, like you say, it's sort of two-pronged in terms of we can look at what can we do more as a society and politically in that, but like every individual, we can seek our own hearts and go, how am I part of the problem? Do I shame? Do I stigmatize? Do I talk about, oh, those junkies? Do I, how am I part of the problem? And I think if we all are really honest, we can identify a place where we have been part of the problem.
Yeah, I think it's right in front of us too. Like, it's the simple things. I think this is such a complex issue. So maybe some people feel a little intimidated and like, how can I help or what can I do? But it's simple. It's just like, going up to somebody that may be sitting outside a coffee shop and just asking them how they're doing, if they're doing okay. It's like you said, the verbiage that we're using, like maybe we're just so used to saying things a certain way, maybe just being more aware of what you're saying, how you're saying it about a certain thing, and kind of tweaking your verbiage a little bit, just little things like that. Or even checking in on a friend, just calling them and saying, hey, I love you, that
Yeah.
helps too. Just like small things like that can really impact your community, and we can make those changes.
Yeah, I don't think we realize the power that kindness has. I think that as I can remember several moments in my life where someone said something kind to me that they probably never thought about again, and it altered something in me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if we were all to practice more of that, we don't know the impact that we can make. So if you were going to leave our listeners with one message about toxic and the opioid crisis, what would your message be?
This issue isn't going away.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to come together as a community. Like, it doesn't matter what your political views are. It doesn't matter. Like, you may think that this issue will never affect you, but I can promise you that it will in some shape or form. So I
Mm-hmm.
think just being open-minded. You might think that maybe this film isn't for you or it doesn't have anything to do with you, but keep an open mind. And I really encourage people to come and check it out. And come see it. It's screening on February 18th at the Rotary Club at the Mary Irwin Theatre on February 18th at 7 p.m. So yeah, I really encourage people to just come with an open mind. And like I said, it doesn't matter what your views are. It's a very we're going to have an open discussion, and we're really hoping to have everybody from the community there.
I love that. I will be there. My husband will be there. We bought some extra tickets for some friends of ours. And I would love to see that sold out, because I think that these kinds of projects start conversations that matter. And I believe that any solution starts with asking the right questions and having conversations as human beings,
Mm-hmm.
working together on a problem, remembering that the problem is the problem. We're not fighting each other. We're trying to fight the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate you being here today, Charles. Thank you so much. Thank you for making this film. I just really admire people who see something that is that hurts their heart, and they don't just stand by and complain about it. They do something about it. And I love to be around people who are up to big things. So I feel very grateful to get to spend some time with you, to have recently met you. I look forward to seeing the film and to supporting you on your journey in any way that I can, because I believe wholeheartedly that we got to get the word out about all of this, and our role in helping our suffering people come back to health. So thank you so much for being here. And I'll look forward to seeing you at the screening of Toxic.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for having me on. And Rob, Kevin, and myself, we're just so appreciative of how the community kind of welcomed us in, and yeah, we're so excited about this screening. So looking forward to seeing everybody.
Awesome. Thanks